we're going to talk about multiplying decimals. So when we multiply two decimals together, let's give you an example here. We are going to perform standard multiplication, and we can use an algorithm. There's lots of different algorithms for multiplication. And then at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to count the number of decimal places. So let me give you a pretty straightforward example. Let's say we've got 6.1, and we want to multiply that by 2.37. Okay, I just made those two numbers up, but what I've got is I've got a number. If I've got about 6, and I'm multiplying it by something that is not quite 2.5, I should be more than 12, right? Because 6 times 2 is 12, and I should be, well, if we go kind of to the extreme, I've got 6 times 3, which is 18. So I'm probably going to be somewhere between 12 and 18 when I get my final answer out. Okay, so just a little bit of common sense in terms of what we have. Now, again, I rounded this number down and rounded this number up. So the 18 might be maybe an underestimate or an overestimate, kind of depending on, because I rounded them both in different directions. But it just gives me a ballpark. So if I get an answer out of 200 and something, I did something wrong. Or if I get an answer out of 0.75, which I wouldn't, but if I did, it tells me I probably did something wrong. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's multiply these together. So what I'm going to do is just take the 6 and the 1 and multiply it by the 2, the 3, and the 7. Okay, so it doesn't really matter the order in which I write these because, again, multiplication is commutative. So maybe I'll put the 2, the 3, and the 7 up top. Doesn't matter. And multiply that by the 6.1. So what our algorithm tells us to do is take this 1, multiply it by each of these, and then take the 6, multiply it by each of these. So, and I'm going to forget about the decimal for right now. We'll come back to the decimal in a little bit. So if I take 1 and I multiply it by 7, I get 7. If I take 1 and multiply it by 3, I get 3. And if I take 1 and multiply it by 2, I get 2. Okay, let's just leave it as 237. Then, because I'm moving over to the left by 1, I'm going to add a 0 down here as a placeholder. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take 6 and multiply it by 7. Well, 6 multiplied by 7 is 42, so I'll put a 2 down here. Put a 4 up there. Okay, so there's our 42. Now 6 times 3 is 18 plus the 4 that we carried over. So that's going to be 22. So put another 2 here. Put a 2 up here. 6 times 2 is 12 plus another 2 gives me 14. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add all of those values together. So I've got 7 coming down here in this column. I've got a 5, I've got a 4, a 4, and a 1. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to count up how many decimal places I had. Well, here I have got 1, 2, and then I've got another one down here. So altogether I've got 3 decimal places. So what I'm going to do from the back of this number is I'm going to count 3 spots. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my decimal point right there. Now I want you to notice that 14 makes sense. If I take something around 6 and multiply it by something around 2, okay, I should be roughly between 12 and 18, somewhere in there. Okay, so it helps me to just take a look to make sure that my answer, I move my decimal point to the correct spot. Had I moved it over here, 1.4, well, that definitely doesn't make sense. You can't take 6, multiply it by more than a number of 1 and get something smaller, smaller than the original value here. And if I moved it over here, 144, well, that just seems like way too much. So this gives me an indicator that my expression is correct.